Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short-track, door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com. From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or visit them online at www.usamotorandmachine.com.
Microcasting for your city, Talkapolis.
Hello everybody and welcome to Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams along with my idol, Larry Woody, who wrote for the Nashville Tennessean for how many years?
Just like you like I typed it up, idle.
Yeah,
about 40 years, but who's counting?
Of course, he's been involved in motorsports and specifically NASCAR for probably a couple of years more than that. I mean, they've
Joe, I covered Ben-Hur's chariot race.
Yeah, Bob Harmon probably promoted it.
Been a long time at it. We've shared a lot of press boxes over the years and media tents and everywhere else under the grandstands, out of the rain interviewing drivers, and now here we are on the newest medium. Newest medium, and we're glad to have you along with us. This is the start of something we hope is going to carry on for a long time. We're going to be talking about racing, automobile racing specifically, mostly NASCAR, but here in the Middle Tennessee area, there are a lot of great local tracks too. And Larry, you've had the opportunity over the years to go to, I guess, every track on the Cup circuit, and some that aren't there anymore. Almost all of them, Joe. I've missed 2 or 3 Michigan off the top of my head, 2 or 3 of the Cup tracks, but and I've also been to a lot of them that aren't running anymore. North Wilkesboro, Riverside, California, some of the great old tracks, Rockingham, that aren't there anymore. So we gain some, we lose some, but I guess that's part of life, isn't it? Everything evolves, everything changes, including stock car racing.
There you go. And Daytona will tell you that quick. Larry also a pretty good author, written several books, several on some guys from around here.
Sterling Marlin, our good friend, a couple of books there. Some football books, Chucky Mullins, but racing's my favorite. Racing's my passion. When I was with the Tennessean, Joe, I was a Vanderbilt beat writer for about 12 years and covered NASCAR, as you said, for about 40 during that time. And the sports editor called me in one day and said, "This is too much work even for you, Woody. We're breaking the beats up. Which do you want?" And I took NASCAR. I took the NASCAR beat over the football, the stick and ball sports, football, basketball, baseball, because I like it. And like you, Joe, not just the sport and the racing, but the people involved in the sport. It's a people sport more than any other sport, I think, and that's the charm of it. The drivers, the people, the media, people like our buddy Terrell Davis, and the whole schmear. Not just the action on the track, but everything. Like you said, Joe, racing is not a sport; it's a lifestyle, and that's why I chose to stick with it.
And the funny part is that family extends out to fans as well as drivers and crew members. And Larry, we've seen the people change, evolve, be different.
For better or worse,
yeah, for better
it has
or worse
evolved.
Today
Yep.
from where you started, and I know from where I started.
The big change, Joe, from the media standpoint is in the old days you could walk down into the garage and there would be Richard Petty sitting on a stack of tires smoking a cigar, and you could walk over and say, "Hey Richard, how you doing?" Say, "Howdy Woody, how's everything in Nashville?" Now you see Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson, and first of all, you can't get within 100 yards because there's a running block of PR people whose job is to make sure no media gets near the drivers. That's the new PR people's job, is to keep the PR people, keep their drivers protected from public relations. And secondly, if you do get near one, they're probably not going to talk to you very much. It's not like in the old days where the Pettys, the Yarboroughs, the Allisons, even David Pearson could be a little shy and reticent, but Pearson would still find time to talk to you. Our buddy Darrell Waltrip, you know, if you couldn't interview Darrell at the track, he'd come over to your house that night and sit on your porch and be interviewed. But I think, Joe, that's the big change from the media standpoint, is how accessible the old guys used to be compared to how inaccessible or difficult that the new guys are to get to.
Have they become just a victim of the success?
Part of it, I think there's such a big press, when some of us are whining about Jeff Gordon not being accessible compared to Richard Petty. They said back in the old days, Richard Petty would have to sign 100 autographs after a race. Nowadays, if Jeff Gordon walks out into the crowd, Jeff's got to sign 1,000 autographs, and most of the guys who get the autographs will go home and put them on eBay and sell them that afternoon, rather than keep them as the true fans used to with Richard Petty's autographs. So that's part of it too. So I guess in defense of the new generation of drivers, things have changed. It's not quite as simple as it used to be. There's so many more demands on the driver's time. Again, in the old days, there's usually a handful of newspapermen chasing Petty and Allison, Yarborough and Waltrip and those guys around the garage. Now you've got TV stations, cable stations, and our new enterprise here. Yeah. So it's evolving. And again, in the defense of those guys, it's probably tougher to be a racing celebrity nowadays than maybe it was in the old days.
I was going to say, Larry, the change too in the media. It used to be this huge deal. If your race was on TV, man, this was a big deal. You might make a little money, but you really got the word out. Now, for the last 15 years or better, starting I guess with ESPN and then the old TNN, if you remember those, on up to the NBC package, the Fox, the whole. Now every race is on TV, and it's almost a challenge to see how we up what we did last week on something that's not on the racetrack itself.
One of my buddies put it best, Joe. He said the sports, sometimes he thinks it's dying of overexposure because, as you said, in the old days, a NASCAR race was a special deal, and you almost had to go to the track live to see one or listen to Barney Hall call it on the radio because, TV people used to make fun of stock car racing. Nobody's going to sit there and watch cars run in circles for 4 or 5 hours. Having said that now, double-edged sword, I think racing is suffering, maybe in our area particularly, from lack of exposure. My old medium, the print media, newspapers, they've almost stopped covering racing. In the old days, there's a stock car race, NASCAR race, it'd be on the front page of the newspaper for 3 or 4 days leading up to it, cover the big coverage of the race, and then 3 or 4 days after rehashing the race. Now you have to, it might be buried 3 or 4 graphs under the want ads on the back page. So I think, Joe, there's a really good opportunity for some of the new medium outlets like this to pick up some of that slack that, frankly, the print media has dropped the ball completely, and some of the electronic media kind of shuffles it back in our area, which is dominated by Predators, Titans, college football, a lot of the stick and ball stuff. So a double-edged sword. On one hand, racing, sometimes you think it's overexposed, and maybe that accounts for some of the empty seats. On the other hand, I know a whole lot of race fans in our area who are always complaining because they can't find news about their favorite sport.
Yeah, now on any level.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part on any level. But that's something that's happened as times change. As you said, the world has gone back to stick and ball.
The sports, particularly in Middle Tennessee, the sports landscape has just changed dramatically from when I came to work at the Tennessean back in the late '60s as a college kid. And I used to do your old radio talk show. We didn't have Titans and Predators to talk about, and now they dominate the local landscape. And I think, Joe, we're seeing. It's kind of a microcosm of what's going on around a lot of the country nowadays. Again, racing fans want to read about racing, and sometimes it's kind of tough to find it.
And Larry, one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is how there used to be the great emphasis on the feeder system that you started at your local racetrack. You moved, let's say, to trucks, and then you moved to nationwide, and then you got your chance to go race with the big guys. Now, so much emphasis is put purely on the top level that the rest of them are beginning to die away. And that's another one of those, I wonder if it's death by success.
Well, of course, our right here in our backyard is a classic example, the old Fairground Speedway. Some of the greatest drivers in NASCAR came up through there. Sterling Marlin, Mike Alexander, Darrell Waltrip. Darrell got his serious start out there. And so, that's a problem too, Joe. And it's always difficult, if you think about it, to work your way up in the top tier of stock car racing, because in football, if you're a good high school player, then you can get a college scholarship and do well in college and impress the NFL scouts and get drafted. There is no college racing team, you know, for a talented young driver to show himself on Friday nights on the like football players do, or get a college scholarship and further prove themselves and work their way up to the pro ranks. It was always difficult, and now with some of the tracks like our Fairground Speedway struggling, like you say, there's no real feeder system anymore for young guys to work their way up. That's another way the sport's changed in recent years.
And hopefully Highland Rim's going to change that. We're going to talk about Highland Rim making its comeback. And Larry, the thing about it is, the way to get to the top now is purely money. And it's all about the money. And it's not just in racing. It's also in these ventures. We'll come back here in a second. After
We've got a lot to complain about.
We got a lot to complain about. We'll come back after hopefully we can make a little money. Stay with us.
From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or visit them online at www.usamotorandmachine.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to this first edition of Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams, along with Larry Woody, my idol and the guru of racing across the country. Larry, a lot of folks don't realize just how far your reach does go out. I know we're doing this morning, and you're going to wind up talking to Seattle later. Yeah,
it's I do a racing show out of Seattle, and a lady from Kentucky, actually, is the host. She's a big racing fan. She contacted me a few years ago. We started doing it, and it's successful. And my daughter lives in upstate New York and called one night and said, "Dad, you're on the radio in upstate New York."
Which you never know where you're going to wind up.
Kind of frightening, isn't it? But no, that goes back to one of our early segments, Joe. There's a tremendous opportunity, I think, for marketing this sport out there, and a lot of race fans are starved for more racing news. So I think it's a good opportunity to get more exposure for the sport.
Not only do you get out around the country and hopefully with this around the world, but you still got some roots. We've still got a lot of roots here in the Middle Tennessee area, and part of that has been the rebirth of Highland Rim Speedway up just north of Nashville, about 20 miles up off the Bethel Road and I-65. Ridgetop, Tennessee. Yep. And Larry, that little quarter mile of asphalt has long had a reputation for being very fast, having great competition, and just giving fans their money's worth week after week. Fell on some hard times, as many racetracks across the country, especially weekly racetracks, have done. And earlier this year, a group of guys who raced or have been involved up there, Buddy Williams, Jerry Criswell, Roger Cunningham, actually did what a lot of folks would never be willing to do. They stepped up and said, "Here's our money. Our money. We're going to take it. We're going to buy it. We're going to fix it up." And they have done a fantastic job on top of the ridge.
It's a nice little track. It's an old track, a vintage track. I think 50 years old. Somebody said.
50th anniversary this year.
50th anniversary. And like you said, Joe, if tracks could talk, what tales that one could tell. It's some great racing up there. Some of the great old NASCAR drivers. Bobby Allison used to go up there. Bobby Hamilton got his start there. Casey Atwood, Chad Chaffin. I think even Bobby Isaac ran up there one time. I went up for some night races there. But it's a tough little track, quarter-mile track. It's back kind of in the rural area. And it's sort of a throwback. When you go to Highland Rim, Joe, it's like going into a time machine. You go back into the 60s. You feel like you start looking around for the ducktail haircuts and the beehive hairdos. But Buddy and his guys, they've taken an old-fashioned concept. They've kept the old-fashioned tradition, the good parts of the tradition, and modernized it. You know, new grandstands, new everything, refurbished. So they've got the best of the old and modernized with the new, so I think it's fun. I'm going to go up there and watch some races.
It's going to be fun. They've gone so far as to replace a bunch of walls on the outside for the racers. They've improved things in the infield for the racers. They've put in brand new grandstands. They've put in new restroom facility buildings, new concessions facility buildings. And Larry, the thing that impresses me about what they did, and the thing that impresses me for the most part, especially with most weekly racetracks and with most of the tracks that have been built, even on the Cup circuit today, the one thing racing has not done, unlike other sports, is go in and hold a city or municipality or a county hostage and say, you've got to put up this much money. You've got to build this thing. You've got to guarantee you're going to have to pay me to operate this.
Yeah, I've always felt, Joe, that the people who own the facility and run the facility and make the money off the facility should pay for the facility.
Exactly.
And they've done that at Highland, and frankly, so is our fairgrounds here. They've leased it from the city, but the guys who operate the track, like you said, they put up the money. They don't let the taxpayers wiggle on the hook for the money. So I like that concept too, and we'll get into the fairgrounds a little later in the segment. But back to Highland Rim, I'm really glad that the old track could be saved, because it's just not a piece of asphalt. It's a pretty big slice of racing history, and not just in Middle Tennessee, but nationwide. Like I say, a lot of wonderful old drivers got their starts there and used to come in and race there. So I'm glad they saved it. I think it's going to be exciting, and I'm going to go up and watch some beating and banging at Highland Rim.
And in the old days, I hate to say old days. I get to think about how old I am now. But in the old days, you had that great rivalry too between the Rim and the fairgrounds. And sometimes they'd work together, and sometimes they wouldn't talk to each other. Drivers would go back and forth or compete at both places. You know, we've seen them go up, run early at the Rim, and get to Nashville, or come to Nashville, run early, get a phone call that says, well, you know, we've had rain or something. Bang, they take off and go 20 miles, and they get to race twice in one night.
And Joe, what I like about the Rim, and we've talked about it before, these guys that race at Highland Rim, they work on their old cars in the backyard, haul them up there, race them, kind of like they used to do in the old days of NASCAR. And I like that kind of throwback, because these guys aren't going to be on national television. They're not going to be racing at Daytona next week. They don't have multi-million-dollar sponsors. They don't have all these juicy TV contracts, endorsements. They race, and they don't make big paychecks. You know, if they're lucky in a good season, they might make gas money. Yeah. And if they don't have tear up too many cars, they might. Again, a good season for them financially is if they break even. So they race. They say, well, why do you do it? Why do you go up there, spend your weekends working on these old cars, hauling them to the track, racing them? They do it because they like racing. Yeah. And it's that pure and simple. You don't need them on a psychiatrist's couch to figure out why they do it. They race because they love it. They're not going to get rich at it. If they're lucky, maybe they won't lose too much money doing it. But that's to me, that appealed. That's part of the charm and the appeal. Old-fashioned racing by guys who race for the fun of it.
Yeah, and you know, Larry, you get very passionate fans that come with that, and that's one of the things.
Sometimes they're a little too passionate.
Sometimes they're too passionate. And that's one of the changes that Buddy and Jerry and Roger have done. You know, if you say racing, you've said beer.
They want passion, but not too much passion.
Exactly. One of the things they've done is not only are they not selling alcohol, they're not allowing alcohol on the property, and you know that's an issue that I fought for years when I was at the fairgrounds. You've seen us fight that issue. As
you say, Joe, it's a very emotional sport. It's more emotional, racing is, than stick and ball. These people, the drivers are almost like members of your family. So if we're watching the Titans and somebody knocks the quarterback out, oh, we've lost our quarterback. If you're watching a stock car race and somebody takes your favorite driver out, it's like they've knocked your little brother out.
Oh, yeah.
So you mix that emotional combination with maybe a volatile element like a drink or two, and it's a mixture for trouble. So I commend Buddy and his guys for doing it. I think it's a good idea, and frankly, I think more tracks may start doing it in the future.
I think so, and you know, the whole idea is bringing this back to a family sport where you can take the kids. You don't have to worry about. I mean, you know, major leagues are great, but I've been around some really bad situations.
Well, there's bad situations at the stick and ball sports, you know, the big league stuff too. Yeah. And so again, that's a problem that Highland Rim doesn't need. They've had to overcome some hurdles, and they've corrected it. And so I think it's a wise move for them. In the old days, Joe, you and I used to remember when people kind of chuckle. You'd go to Highland Rim for the fight and stay for the race. And
that's not the only place that was.
And again, we joke about it, but you're right. If you're going to sell it as a family sport, which the new owners are, you've got to get that element out of there, that kind of that roughneck element, and make it a family sport so you can take the wife and kids and not have to worry about the ruffian element. So I think I think it's going to benefit Highland Rim and the racing up there.
And one of if you want to see just how well they've done, they will be racing this Saturday, tomorrow night, the 27th. Starts about 4 o'clock. Larry, they've got a big super stock race. They've got planned. Understand, John Earnhardt. They don't call him the Bull for nothing. You've got Matt Barnes. I'm betting Stephanie will be there. There's a whole bunch of folks. They're expecting 20, 25 cars. Now, you say 20, 25 cars, you think that's not, we're talking about a quarter-mile racetrack. That big cars on a quarter-mile racetrack, that's going to get crowded.
That's right. The pole sitter can almost run over the last car at the start of the race. So, yeah, 25 is a good field of cars on a quarter-mile track.
And they're going to go 50 laps. And you think about it, 12 and a half miles. That's not the distance. 12 and a half miles is not the distance from Nashville to the rim. But, boy, it could take a while, and it can be intense.
And, Joe, for the benefit of viewers, listeners who might not be familiar with the Highland Rim, that's a paved track.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you think about a quarter-mile track out in the countryside, this is paved.
Yeah, this is a high-banked asphalt.
It's fast, yeah.
A lot of folk, it's been called Little Bristol before. The banks are not quite as high, but it's still a good place. Bobby Hamilton said that some of his best experience was coming from the banks at the rim to the banks at the fairgrounds, because it was so easy then to change to the banks at Daytona, at Charlotte, at Atlanta.
It's a body shop operator's dream.
Yeah, it can be.
No dull moments.
It can be. Yeah. They'll start racing tomorrow at 4 o'clock. That's at Highland Rim Speedway. Now, they're up I-65 from Nashville. You're coming from Kentucky. Obviously, you're going to come down I-65. All you got to do is look for the Bethel Road exit.
And there's a Highland Rim exit sign on I-65, an actual Highland Rim sign,
sides.
So you can't miss it.
Jump off at Bethel Road and just follow the signs to Highland Rim Speedway. Like I said, they'll start racing Saturday the 27th, about 4 o'clock. And my understanding is they've got several more events planned. They kind of got a late start with all the construction that they had to go through, and they're going to try to make up for it on the back.
And you can get tickets at the gate, so you don't have to plan in advance, get advance tickets. The weather's pretty, hop in the car and go to the track.
And unheard of at a sporting event, free parking.
Yep.
May be the last thing that's free. We unfortunately have to pay a couple of bills, so we need to take a break here. We'll come back with the final segment here on Pit Pass.
Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short track door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the first edition of Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams, along with my buddy Larry Woody. Larry, got to give a shout out to our friends out at USA Motor and Machine over on Cleveland Avenue. Buddy Williams and the guys, anything from your daily driver to race car engines. And these guys can take care of it. If you've got a little knocking somewhere, Buddy can close the door on it, I guarantee you. Give him a call over at USA Motor and Machine on Cleveland.
And Joe, the most important thing in racing, always mention your sponsor.
Oh, you've got to do that.
You can lose a lot of races, but you got to mention that sponsor. And speaking of races, we've got a big one coming up.
Yeah, now this weekend we go to Martinsville with a chase that's heated up. 4 races left, Larry. You've got the shortest of all tracks, Martinsville to begin with. Then they go to Dallas, Texas, where our old buddy Eddie Gossage is ready to do. He just does it bigger and better. He's the new Humpy.
And got his start right out here at the fairgrounds.
Then they go to Phoenix, which is about a mile. And Texas I usually call a cookie-cutter racetrack, but it's not really. They've made some changes to that. And they finish at Homestead. So there's only 4 races left to go. And, Larry, there's really only 4 guys with a chance to win this thing. You've got Keselowski, who's leading, Jimmy Johnson stalking there in second, and then there's Hamlin, who's back there. And basically, I guess you'd say those 3 really are the last 3.
And if Hamlin doesn't make a major move Sunday at Martinsville, Joe, I think it's a 2-car show between Keselowski and Jimmy Johnson. So I think there's a ton of pressure at Martinsville Sunday.
Keselowski, the question that I've got for you, Denny Hamlin had a championship won, everybody thought. And then he gave it up. Is Keselowski in that same position now? He's got a 7-point lead. Is he in the spot where he's got to lose this one to win one later?
No, I think, Joe, he can handle the pressure. He's a bright young driver, and most people are asking what you're asking. Here's a young guy, a relatively young guy who's never won a championship, and he's got a former 5-time champion, Jimmy Johnson, maybe the best driver, arguably the best driver in the last decade or so, 5-time champion, breathing down his back. You'd think Keselowski would just melt like candle wax under the pressure. I don't think this kid's going to melt. He's got ice water in his veins. We've seen him go up against the best of the best in this sport. I think Keselowski is going to win the championship. I don't think Jimmy's
going to make that call right now.
Yeah, I think he's going to win the championship. It's his to lose, and he hadn't showed much signs of folding under the pressure, and that's a good, steady team. Roger Penske, they don't make a lot of mistakes. It's his to lose, to give away in 4 races. I don't think they're going to lose it or give it away.
Let's talk about Denny Hamlin a minute. If he makes a big move at Martinsville, and then maybe makes a big move at Texas, gets back in the middle, is this the one he wins to make up for the one that he lost?
He's got to make up some lost ground somewhere, because he's had a couple of slips. And in a 10-race championship, Joe, as you know, if you dig yourself a hole early, as Matt Kenseth did. Kenseth has won 2 of the last 3 races, but he's eliminated anyway. So he got in too big a hole too early, and he can't climb out. Same way with Jeff Gordon, whom I predicted to win the championship early in the season. He managed to squeeze into the chase, but he hadn't really been a contender. He got down too deep, too early, can't climb out. So no, I think you're right. It's probably a four-man race, and realistically maybe a 2-man race. But again, if any of these other guys, third and back, are going to make a move, I think they've got to do it Sunday at Martinsville.
Well, that brings us to current number 2, 5-time number 1, Jimmy Johnson, who, you know, you kind of get the feeling he's kind of like a tiger sitting back licking his chops, waiting on that one mistake from the team in front.
I think Jimmy Johnson, Joe, is the Dracula of NASCAR. Every time you think he's dead, he rises from the dead, and you look up, and there he is, competing for another championship. He slipped last year. You know, he won 5 in a row. Then Tony Stewart won last year and interrupted the streak, NASCAR record streak. And now you say, well, Jimmy's out now. He's lost his groove. He's lost his vibe, whatever, karma. And you look up, and here he is running second to Keselowski, and 7 points, a heartbeat away from taking the lead and maybe winning the 6th championship. Never count Jimmy Johnson out. He's a super talented driver, obviously, to do what he's done. Even Richard Petty couldn't do some of the things Jimmy Johnson's done. And super talented driving talent, and great crew chief behind him, kind of the caddy who hands him his club. And then you've got Hendricks Motorsport, the most successful stock car operation in the history of NASCAR. So Jimmy's got a lot of things going for him. Did we mention he's got a supermodel wife? Yeah,
and a good kid too.
Yeah, so Jimmy's got a lot of things going for him. You obviously don't count Jimmy.
Which makes you wonder, why then does he strap himself into this thing every week and take the chance of getting hurt?
The same reason that the guys do up at Highland Rim. They just the same reason that a beagle chases a rabbit. They can't help it. It's genetics. When the fire bell rings, the old fire horse has to lay his ears back and go. That's why Jimmy Johnson does it, even though he's got more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. These guys can't walk away from it.
Now, one fella who has absolutely no shot at winning the Cup title this year, but we're going to see him back at Martinsville after a couple of weeks out, Dale Earnhardt Jr., who has gone through 2 pretty, apparently significant concussion situations after some really hard crashes. Larry cleared the race at Martinsville, and he's coming back.
Yeah, the big story at Martinsville this weekend, Joe, will not be who's on the track and who's competing for the championships, but who is not competing. And again, Junior will be back on the track. He sat out the last 2 races after a concussion at Talladega. He's been medically cleared to race Sunday at Martinsville. Joe, I'm just not sure it's a good idea. I don't see if an athlete, race driver, football player, whomever, suffers a concussion that's serious enough to keep him out of 2 races and cost Junior a shot at his first championship. If that concussion was that severe, how in the world does he heal up sufficiently to strap himself back in a stock car and go racing 2 weeks later at Martinsville? I think it's, I'm no neurosurgeon, but it just doesn't seem to me like it's that good an idea. As you say, the championship is long gone for Junior. He has nothing to really gain in these last 4 races. He's fighting for 12th place in the standings. 12th is 12th. He's not going to win the championship. Why risk compounding the injury to run these last 4 races? Why not sit out, play it safe, sit out, really heal up, and then come back fresh at Daytona in February?
Then I'm going to use the same argument you just used. It's genetics.
He can't help it.
He can't help it. He's got to get back. He's reached that point where NASCAR's neurosurgeon, Dr. Petty, has said he's cleared to race. He's good to go. He's going to get back in that car.
Yeah.
He can't help it. That's his genetics. That's part of his makeup.
And again, though, you are talking about a head injury, and in the NFL, there's ongoing surveys about how head injuries linger. It might be years down the road before they're really apparent how severe they were. And the stock car racing, Joe, it's such a different animal. If Junior were going to go play golf this week or tennis, I'd say, or go bowling, fine.
Yeah.
But Junior's going to strap himself in a stock car and go out at Martinsville. Granted, the speeds aren't excessive at Martinsville. It's a short track, but there's a lot of beating and banging, and a driver can take a lot of jolts and hard licks and fender bending and crunching and that kind of thing. So Junior's not going bowling this week. He's going stock car racing, and I'm not sure that a driver who's 2 weeks off a major concussion has any business out there as badly as Junior wants to be in that car.
But Larry, if he waits, his next option to come back this year would be Texas, with those speeds and those G-forces.
I wouldn't come back this year. I would set out. I'd set out the 4 because he's already out of championship contention, having missed the last 2 races. He's out of contention. So why risk his neck, literally, to go out and fight to hang on to 12th place in the final standings? Set out these next 4, make sure he's healed up as badly as NASCAR wants him on the track and as badly as the Junior Nation and the millions of fans want to see him. I'm just not sure it's a prudent thing to do health-wise, long-term wise, for him to risk it.
Scariest part of this whole deal is he's already been diagnosed twice with a concussion.
Yeah.
Typically that 3rd bad concussion is when they say don't do this anymore. Larry, if he goes out at Martinsville, following along, you think he needs to sit out. But if he sits out, goes to Daytona. If he goes to Martinsville, if he goes to Texas, something happens. If Dale Earnhardt Jr. gets told at any point in the next 2-3 years in his career, you've had another concussion, it's time to quit. What happens to NASCAR? It's
devastating, and for the same reason it's devastating for the PGA when Tiger Woods is not out on that golf course. He's the star attraction. People watch him, half of them watch him to pull against him, and half of them watch to pull for him, as Dale Earnhardt Sr. is the case there. For the same reason the NBA like to have Michael Jordan on the court. TV ratings go up, attendance goes up, media coverage goes up, everything goes up when you got your star player out there. And in NASCAR, Junior, even though he's never won a championship, is NASCAR's star player. He's 9-time most popular driver award winner. He's the guy, the single driver that more fans tune in to watch every week. And so, of course, NASCAR would like to see him out there. And I'm hoping that need for NASCAR's need for Junior to be out there it wasn't a factor in this. I'm hoping it just came down to what you said, this Junior's urge to race, because again, I'm just a little leery. I was at Daytona the day that we lost Junior's dad, Dale Sr., to, ironically, a head injury. Yeah. That's how Dale Sr. Killed Dale Sr., and now we've got Dale Jr. wrestling with a head injury. I don't know. I hope it's not some kind of bad karma hanging over him, because Junior's not just a good race driver. He's a good kid. I've known him, and you've known him since he's tagging around after his dad out at the old fairgrounds. As a teenager, he used to come out there and race with his brother and sister. He's a genuinely good kid. The celebrity, the multi-billion dollars, all this stuff hasn't turned his head. He's still just a good old boy from North Carolina, and I'm fond of Junior not because he's a race driver, NASCAR celebrity. I like him because he's Dale Jr., and I don't want to see anything happen to him.
As you say, and it seems like he's finally reaching that point where he's comfortable being in his own body.
I think he's always been, Joe. I don't think he's ever let the celebrity stuff sway him.
I think he's felt some of the pressure of being Dale Jr.
His stepmother, Teresa, once said that Earnhardt said he needs to decide if he wants to be a stock car racer or a rock star. Yeah. I just never saw that in Junior. And maybe the times I was around him, he was always accommodating, personable. We're talking about how inaccessible some of the modern drivers are in stock car racing. Junior had never been like that with me. He was always inaccessible. I'd known, of course, his dad forever and known the family, so that might have helped a little. But Junior, I've heard other people say that Junior's pretty down home, pretty accessible. So I don't think any of the celebrity stuff had really turned his head. And again, that was one of the things I always reminded him about it, Joe. I'd hate to think what would have happened to me if I were a young, handsome, rich celebrity. I'd be on one of your private islands right now. But Junior never let any of that affect him, I didn't think.
Well, good luck to him this week. He'll be with the rest of the guys up in Martinsville. And hopefully next week we'll be back. For Larry Woody, I'm Joe Williams. Thank you for watching Pit Pass. We'll see you next week.
Microcasting for your city. Talkapolis.